This is TWiT.
Many of us are playing pretty fast and loose these days with who we're sharing some of our personal information with. But what about your DNA? Who owns yours? Consumer protection lawyer Joel Winston recently wrote a Medium piece about the terms of service for Ancestry.com, and he's here to talk about his concerns. Welcome to the show, Joel.
Thanks for having me, Megan.
So Ancestry DNA promises to uncover your ethnic mix, help you discover distant relatives, and find new details about your unique family history with a simple DNA test. But you recently dug into their terms of service, which caused some concern. What were you wary about when you read it?
Yeah, thanks. I think I'm getting too much credit. I didn't dig in so much as I just read the terms of service.
That's more than most people do.
Exactly.
I would classify that as digging in.
Everybody hits click to agree, but nobody reads what they're clicking to agree. So we took a look at what was in there, and it turns out there's a couple of provisions that are favorable to Ancestry.com and less favorable to their customers.
So the chief privacy officer, Eric Heath from Ancestry.com, he responded to your post and then revised the terms of service. What do you think about the revisions that he made?
So I think it's a step in the right direction. The blog post that he posted doesn't have any legal effect on the terms of service or the privacy policy or the informed consent agreement that customers sign when they purchase an Ancestry DNA test service and kit. The information in the blog is more of a public relations response to try to get people on the same page about what they're doing, but they're not really providing a truthful and transparent response to consumers about how they're monetizing that DNA data.
Yeah, I guess that's the big question, right? Is if they have it built into the terms of service. I know a lot of times with terms of service, they play it kind of, they play it almost loose to the point where it's like, yeah, we have control over this, though we're not spelling out exactly how we're going to use it, but that gives us freedom to, figure that out later, and you never really know exactly what's happening to it. In this case, I mean, is there any indication as far as what could actually be done with this type of ownership over your DNA at this point?
Yeah, so we do know that Ancestry is selling the DNA data, both the aggregated data, raw DNA samples, and possibly individualized data to for-profit research groups, to pharmaceuticals, and other entities. Ancestry has promised that in the future, they will not sell to health insurance companies, to employers, or to other third-party marketers. But according to the terms of their legal contract within the terms of service, they still have the right to make those sales.
They were also parsing the language a little bit. Your blog post said they own your DNA, and what they were saying was they're really just licensing it. And the terms of service says that they have a transferable license to host, transfer, process, analyze, distribute, and communicate your genetic information for the purposes of providing you products and services. So from a legal perspective, can you talk a little bit about what the difference, if there is any, between owning and licensing?
Absolutely. There's a fine legal distinction between a perpetual worldwide royalty-free license to your DNA versus ownership of your DNA. Of course, they don't have exclusive ownership of your DNA because it's still in your body, so you still own your DNA. They don't have an absolute ownership of your DNA because the terms of service allow any of the customers to withdraw their consent during the period of their life. But they do take a license to analyze and to sell your DNA. And so the distinction between whether they own it or they license is lost on 99% of the public, because the license allows them to do basically all of the things of ownership.
And I mean, over the lifetime, that's obviously a very long time. What can someone do to retract that? And is it a clean break at that point? I mean, if they decide after agreeing to the terms of service and that DNA information changes hands, is it there in perpetuity? They can only protect themselves so far, but not entirely?
Yeah, that's a good question. The terms of service is the legal contract that controls the use of the data, and the contract is what gives the customers the right to request that their data be deleted. So because the contract allows the data to be deleted, a customer can request that the data can be deleted. If Ancestry were to change those terms and no longer allow people to withdraw their consent, then you might lose control over your data. Here, the contract allows you to withdraw your consent, and if you take a couple of additional steps, you can request that your actual raw sample be fully deleted, and Ancestry promises to do that and to carry it out.
So when I am on Facebook and, liking things and posting things, posting pictures, those are things that I'm handing over to Facebook, and, they're mine, presumably. But when you're talking about handing over your DNA, there's, your DNA is very unique, but then part of it is unique to other people as well. So what privacy concerns are there when you're talking about really trying to figure out who your ancestors are? Are you also handing over your ancestors' DNA, or not your ancestors, but people who might be related to you?
Yeah, interestingly, you could be handing over your descendants' DNA. So your great-granddaughter may have trouble getting a life insurance policy based on the DNA that you turn over today. So a lot of these things down the road and in the future may be speculative, but we do know today that DNA can be used for law enforcement purposes. It can be used for insurance underwriting purposes, either in life insurance or possibly in health insurance if the protections against pre-existing conditions are removed. There are also certain instances in which your employer can acquire portions of this information. So there is a patchwork of state and federal legislation that provides privacy rights, but the right to privacy is not absolute.
Yeah, and you talk a little bit in your piece about informed consent, about how that information somewhere down the line could be handed over to authorities in an investigation, let's say. And so, I mean, the damage potentially long term is pretty severe. It's not just information, which we're used to kind of trading willy-nilly on the internet. It's your DNA, and that can link up to a whole lot of things outside of just the digital world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to be very clear that what Ancestry is doing is completely legal. There's no accusations that they've done anything illegal. But the honest truth of the matter is that consumers need to be aware of these terms and services that they're signing, the rights that they're giving away. Most of them just don't understand, because these are terms written by a lawyer, and it takes other lawyers to decipher what the terms mean. So consumers are really at a disadvantage. So it's incumbent upon services like Ancestry.com to be fully and completely transparent about how they intend to monetize the data. So it's similar to the situation we saw a couple of weeks ago with Unroll Me, where people didn't understand that by giving access to their inbox to somebody else, that their emails and other information about them could be sold to third parties.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's really
sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to say transparency is one thing, but people actually taking the time to dive in and read it is another challenge entirely, which I think a lot of people, and I'm fully guilty of this myself. You just see those. I mean, you've seen a million of them. We've agreed to 1 million TOS screens because we use a lot of things. We use a lot of services. We're just kind of used to clicking the accept box. There are services like TOSDR.org, which stands for Terms of Service Didn't Read.org, that basically crowdsource kind of the analysis of TOS. Do you think those do a good job of kind of bridging the gap, helping people to kind of find information without having to read every single word of a term of service?
Yeah, it's important to provide ways for people to understand these, and nobody should feel necessarily guilty about this. These legal contracts are extensive and they're everywhere. Your grandparents may never have agreed to a contract like this, maybe once in their life if they applied for a mortgage, but we're confronted with this multiple times every day through every app that we use, even every website that you visit. Just by landing on that website and clicking around, you're agreeing to an extensive legal contract. And it's important to note that these contracts allow the companies to update them at any time they see fit and as they please. So like what happened here with Ancestry, they went by themselves and updated the terms of service. So now everybody who's an Ancestry customer is obligated to go back to those terms and reread them and decide again if they want to accept them or reject them.
So as a privacy attorney, would you say that if you happen to read a terms of service agreement and it says that a company can sell your data, even if you talk to them and they say we're not doing it, would you just recommend that people just assume that every company will, who says they can in their terms of service?
Yeah, I would say that you cannot take anybody at face value. You cannot trust a blog post. As a lawyer, the only thing that matters is the language of the legal contract, especially when the legal contract specifically says only this legal contract applies and no writing or speaking outside of this contract will have any effect. So it's up to the individual and consumers to share this information, to ask companies that they do business with for more transparency about how their data is being used, and to take an active role in managing the release of their own data.
So you are on Twitter at Medical Report. Is a lot of your privacy-related work related to people sharing their medical information?
Yes. So originally, if you remember, before Obamacare kicked in and pre-existing conditions were eliminated, it was quite common for health insurance companies to underwrite applicants based on their own medical history. And there are actually a number of providers that provide basically a credit report for your health, which is a medical report, just like a free credit report you might get when you want to apply for a credit card. There are similar credit reports that contain information about your prescriptions, your doctor's visits, your ailments, your risky hobbies, all types of information about you that you may consider to be particularly sensitive, but that companies have access to when you apply to do business with them. So it's not just a matter of protecting privacy for privacy's sake, but the information in your files could actually cost you money or even cost you the ability to purchase a policy.
Well, Joel, thank you so much for joining us. Joel Winston is at Medical Report on Twitter. Is there any other place where people can follow you online?
Twitter is a great place. You can also check out my law firm website and find me on Medium.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joel.
Can, of course, read this piece on Medium, which is as well on Think Progress. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Have a great night.